Hey everybody, it's Dan Harris. Thanks for checking out our video series. Today's video is sponsored by Sleeper, the most popular Dynasty League fantasy football app. Today we're going to be talking about my top 8 running backs to avoid in the 2021 fantasy football season. Alright, let's start in Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor. Taylor finished as the RB6 last year in half PPR formats, but it wasn't exactly a linear season for him. He got his chance earlier than expected last year after Marlon Mack went down with a season-ending injury in week 1, but he did little with it for the vast majority of the season. And it wasn't just that the Colts kept rotating in Nyheim Hines or Jordan Wilkins. Even when Taylor put up numbers, he just didn't look good. He frequently seemed to be missing open holes or just plowing into the back of his offensive linemen. And then came that dominant 6-game stretch to end the season against a slew of weak opposing rush defenses. And now he's being drafted as the 6th running back off the board. That's just a little too early. First, even if we assume Carson Wentz is ready for week 1, which by the way is still a big if, there's just no way Taylor is going to see the 22 touches per game that he saw over his final 6 games last year. Say what you will about Marlon Mack, but he is a capable back who, is still on the roster. And Frank Reich wants a committee. He really makes no secret about it. Now, is Taylor going to be an RB1 this year? Yeah, I do expect that, and I'm ranking him and drafting him as such. But at this point, the fact that he's being drafted ahead of Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones and Saquon Barkley and a few others in half PPR leagues really does not factor in his downside. At his price, you're better off passing for another running back. Next up, let's talk about Miles Sanders. Sanders has 28 career games and has surpassed 15 touches in just 11 of them. That is not the definition of a workhorse back, in case you lacked a fantasy football dictionary. Now, Sanders is talented, but if you have played fantasy football for any length of time, you know that talent is maybe like half the battle at best. Opportunity, touches, that is the name of the game. And Sanders just hasn't had it to this point in his career. But Dan, it's a new offense, it's a new coaching staff, maybe they'll turn over a new leaf. Well, let's look at the evidence. As I record this, the Eagles running back room consists of Sanders, Kerryon Johnson, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, and Kenneth Gainwell. Their new head coach is Nick Sirianni, who comes from Indianapolis, and Frank Reich, who, as we just talked about, wants a committee approach to their backfield. And there's another running back on this team, and he plays quarterback. That's Jalen Hurts. And while rushing quarterbacks increase running back efficiency, they do not increase running back touches. Sanders is the 20th running back in half PPR ADP. That's not crazy, but it's still a few spots too high, and I'm avoiding him at that selection. All right, next up, let's go to Oakland and talk about Josh Jacobs. Now, Jacobs certainly finished the 2020 season as an RB1, but he really never felt like an RB1. He got plenty of volume. His 273 carries and his 12 total touchdowns were each 3rd most among running backs last year. But he wasn't involved much in the passing game, and we had the whole Instagram hoax in week 14, and again, he just never felt like an RB1. And what do we have now? Well, 2 things. The biggest is the addition of Kenyon Drake to a fairly decent contract. We've already seen Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington take away work from Jacobs. What happens when you add an actually talented and viable 2nd running back? And second of all, the Raiders' offensive line is just worse than last year, which means Jacobs is probably going to need even more touches than last year to maintain his value. He's currently at RB16 in half PPR ADP. That's just nuts. Chris Carson, David Montgomery, they're both easy picks ahead of him. And for me, probably a handful of other backs are too. Next up, let's talk about RAHEEM MOSTERT and the San Francisco 49ers running back situation. Now, I really do love Mostert's talent. It's really hard not to. He's fantastic whenever he's on the field. 282 career carries, 1,590 yards with 11 touchdowns. But he is 29 years old, and 282 carries by the time you're 29 years old, that tells you pretty much all you need to know about his health. And now the 49ers traded up to get Trey Sermon, so that's pretty good insight into how they're viewing Mostert's outlook. Even with Sermon, if we knew Mostert would be healthy all season, he'd be a fine RB2. But not only do we not know that, we pretty much know the opposite. Mostert is not going to be healthy all season. He never has been. And unlike previous years where other options included the uninspiring Tevin Coleman or the oft-injured Matt Breida, we've now got Sermon. Again, a running back who this regime specifically targeted this year. So if Mostert gives up the starting running back role due to injury, he may never get it back. And with an ADP of exactly 28, that's a little too rich for my blood. Next up, let's talk about Javonte Williams. All right, so this is one where I'm probably on an island, so feel free to ignore this. Williams has tons of talent, and in a dynasty league, I would be all over him. But I just do not see the upside for the 2021 season. First, the chances of entirely overtaking Melvin Gordon are, in my mind, minimal. Say what you will about Gordon, but he's still a very capable back, and he averaged 4.6 yards per carry and added 32 catches last year. When you have a rookie running back and an aging veteran starter, like Gordon, it is just pretty rare for the rookie to supplant the starter. And that's especially true when the starter is playing for a regime that gave him a 2-year, $18 million deal. The Broncos want him there. They want him to be their guy this year. So without that, we're really looking at the Phillip Lindsay role from last year. And that's the type of role you can use as a flex most weeks, but probably not much better. So yeah, draft Williams, that's fine. But like Mostert, he has an ADP of exactly 28 in half PPR formats. I'm personally avoiding him there, and I am taking Melvin Gordon, who is going several picks later, before him. All right, next up, let's talk about Leonard Fournette. Now, without the playoff Lenny performance, Fournette's ADP would be like 10 spots lower than his ADP of 32.7 at the running back position. But there was playoff Lenny, and the Bucs absolutely did not need to re-sign Fournette, but they did. Those are great signs, right? Yeah, but Fournette had more than 52 yards rushing just one time all last year. He got most of his points from the passing game, and the Bucs went out and signed Giovanni Bernard. Remember, even in the playoffs, Fournette was seeing 5 targets and 4 catches per game. This is a major part of his value. Those numbers are not sustainable with Bernard in tow. And remember, Fournette only got his chance in the playoffs because of Ronald Jones's injury. Jones had earned that starting role before then. Fournette is going in almost the same spot as Ronald Jones in ADP, and that's just silly to me. He's a backup who needs an injury to provide major value. Next up, let's talk about David Johnson. I mean, if there is one team to avoid this year, it's the Texans, and you probably know that already. Although Deshaun Watson is back in camp, there is little chance in my mind that he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans this year for like a million reasons. That means that the Texans offense is just not something you want a part of on a good day. And although Johnson had a very respectable season with more than 1,000 total yards and 8 touchdowns in just 12 games last year, he's just not going to come close to those numbers this season. In addition to the offense being worse, as of right now, you've got Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, and Rex Burkhead in that backfield. And you know what type of team does not rely on the run game? Teams that are behind like all day, like the Texans are going to be pretty much every single game. There's just so little upside and so much downside with Johnson going at RB34. Take Michael Carter or Trey Sermon or anybody else who's going later. Finally, let's discuss James Robinson. I have to believe that Robinson's ADP of 24 is because people are just slow to come around on the new reality. And that new reality is named Travis Etienne. Now look, we know that the Jaguars wanted to draft Kadarius Toney and the Giants took him, so they pivoted to Etienne. So maybe they really do just want that pass catching option. But also, no, they don't. Robinson is gonna get some work for sure, but he is not a part of this regime. And by the way, Jacksonville also added Carlos Hyde. What's funny is that this should be a situation where no fantasy managers want to draft Robinson, and I'm the one advocating for the fact that he'll probably get 30 to 40% of the carries and is worth a bench spot. But instead, he's being drafted as an RB2. That is not what Urban Meyer thinks of him, and it's not what you should think of him. Pass on Robinson until like 35 running backs or more are off the table. And that's going to do it for my top 8 running backs to avoid in the 2021 fantasy football season. Don't forget to subscribe here to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/FantasyPros and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so you don't miss any of the great content that we're going to be putting out all season long.